On the second Thursday in January, I lost, like so many of you, my teacher, my mentor. Professor Frost need not be enlarged
minutes. So if you could take your seats, we'd appreciate it. We'll give you a little time to chat beforehand. So.
Thoughts come down from heaven like water, drown my mind like a preacher does. There ain't no time for regret or sorrow, nobody seems to care. Oh, and I am tired, but I can't fight not seeing your face. Nobody's getting my soul. Nobody's getting my soul. Nobody's getting my soul. Nobody. Please don't tell me you're in
Good afternoon. I'm finding it very difficult today. I love my brother, and I'm sad. You see, I'm at a bit of a loss as to what to do because my brother was the first person I called to help me through everything. If I was sad, I called Chris. If I was excited, I called Chris. If I had news about the kids or my job or anything, I called Chris. And if I just wanted to shoot the breeze, of course, I just called Chris. I loved my brother, and I miss him terribly. I know many of you are feeling the same way. When I was sad or upset, Chris would say, well, we just can't have that. And then dispense some wise advice. As an aside, when I was happy or excited, he would say, well, all right then. You guys ever hear him say either one of those phrases? We can't have that. And, well, all right then. Once and only once I complained that I was bored to him. Let's just say that did not go well. He had no patience for boredom. To him, life was always an adventure, and there was always more to do and experience. Chris was foundational to our family. I expect he was that way to many of you here today. A foundation of his family, the law school, this city, and his friends. My job this afternoon is to tell you a little bit about my brother you may not have known, or at least hadn't thought about before. I really thought about titling this section, Little Sister's Revenge. I decided against it though. Chris, if you're listening, I promise I'm not going to tell anyone that you were pudgy through adolescence, that you were actually a terrible student in high school, that you wrestled in the 98-pound class, and that you square dance. I promise all that uncool stuff I'm leaving out. Instead, what I will tell you is how much he loved life, how much he loved his life. He fought hard against his diagnosis. His doctor told us she couldn't believe how strong he was and how determined. The day before we learned it was the end, he was up and dressed, sitting at a table to visit with Aunt Alex, Candy, and me. I can't imagine how much pain he must have felt and how bad he felt, but he didn't complain. Massively strong. But back to my job for today, a little early history. His father was a portrait artist. You may have seen some of the portraits he did of Chris out in the hallway. His mom, who's here today, was a third employee at what today we'd call a successful startup. Not surprisingly, both were very successful and very smart. Chris, when he was in high school, worked at his grandfather's sawmill. He was the first in his family to attend university. He left the house at 17 to live on his own in a trailer park right off North Broadway here in Lexington. He worked for a year here. He had to qualify for in-state tuition at UK. Also, did you guys see the pictures of him when he was in law school? They'll come back. His hair was as long as mine. He was quite the rebel. And those tattered jeans, I think those are back in style now. My brother also loved adventure. He was amazing at water skiing. And he loved the water because we spent most of our summers at the state parks in Kentucky. While still in high school, he could ski barefoot and trick ski. He qualified as a lifeguard at the age of 15. He was a great guitar player. He liked to shoot guns. He was a better than average gardener and photographer. He loved motorcycles He raced cars. He loved to go fast. Maybe that's why he was so impatient and intense. You never wanted to wait in line with Christopher, ever. Trust me. He fiercely loved his people, and those people included a large swath, from students to colleagues to his driver guys or car guys, as he called you, the gun folks, the political buddies, the lunch crowd, even the Zoom lunch crowd that I heard about earlier today, his friends, and of course, his family. We are blessed that he brought Candy and her family, who are here today, to our family. Miss Candy, as he called her, literally brought a smile to his face every day. And she's doing that for the rest of us, even now, despite being devastated by the loss of her husband. He was a wonderful father and uncle. Man, he was proud of his kids, and with good reason. He and his first wife, Christine, raised two amazing people in Nikki and Alex. Nikki is a doctor. Alex is a top engineer at his company and can lift, I don't know, something crazy like 500 pounds or something like that, right, Alex? He was super proud of them, as we all are. We lost Christine last year, so Nikki and Alex have lost both parents in less than a year. All the aunts and uncles and the grandmas, we've all been swarming in to help take care of them. But honestly, they are the ones leading us through our grief. I cannot emphasize enough how proud we are of their leadership and resilience, a living testament to their parents. I think you all knew that Chris had an amazing intellect. He was first in his class at the law school here at UK, but what you might not have known is that he was also first in his class as an undergrad here at UK in finance. Boy, he was really smart and so well-read. And he did not tolerate idleness or sloth. Do the work, and you were on his good side. Don't do the work, well, I'm sure some students here may have learned that lesson. What my brother did mattered. To think, over 30 years of teaching law, how many students he touched. I tried to figure it out, and I got to 6,000 or so, maybe more. Think how much smarter they are for being in his class. Think about the good they are doing in the world today. He mattered to the city as the board chair for the newly renovated courthouse, by leading the transition team for 2 of the city's mayors, by engaging in political policy. He mattered to his profession, as I know you'll hear about more later today. He accomplished a lot in his 61 years. So, how do we move forward without him? Well, I know Chris would not want us to be sad. In my mind, I can hear him saying, we just can't have that. I would say something like, I know, Chris, but it is sad. And he would say, well, you're just gonna have to figure something out, because we can't have that. So what do we do? Well, I think we should do what Chris would do. Let's live like he did. Let's be foundational to our families and friends. Let's try all kinds of crazy activities and adventures. Let's engage in our cities and our politics. And for heaven's sakes, don't be bored, because we just can't have that. I now have the pleasure and honor to introduce our guest speakers. Next up is Congressman Ben Chandler. From 2004 to 2013, Ben was a member of the United States House of Representatives, representing Kentucky's 6th District, Currently, he is president and CEO for the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky. But to Chris and our family, he was a law school buddy and a lifetime friend. Chris looked back fondly on his law school days, a time when he both worked hard and played hard. And maybe it was during those crazy parties that the close bonds formed between Ben and Chris. I'm not sure. Chris also served on Ben's election campaign for governor. They both share a passion for the world of politics and had a common goal of making Kentucky a better place. Ben?
Thank you, Valerie, Mrs. Frost, Miss Candy, Alex, and Nikki. I don't want to be here. None of us do. It is, in so many ways, just the saddest thing. But, as Valerie said, we just can't have that. And you mentioned what I was, but mainly what I feel like I was Chris's friend. And that was a big deal to me, to be Chris's friend. And I am honored that you all asked me to be here to say a few words about Chris. He was simply a lovely human being in so many different ways. I expect others today will tell you about the incredible impact that he had. Valerie's already started that process on the many legal minds who have been educated at the school. My wife and I have 2 children at this school right now. Our daughter Lucy is a 2L, and she was fortunate to have Chris for contracts last year. Actually, I'm pretty sure Professor Frost insisted that Miss Chandler be assigned to his class. Of course, she loved his class, and she loved him. Early last fall, just a few days before the semester kicked off, Chris gave our son Branham, now a 1L, a guided tour of the new building. Branham was really looking forward to Chris's class, but his cancer worsened, as it turned out, and he wasn't able to teach Branham. It was Branham's loss that Chris had to take a step back from teaching, which of course was a tremendous loss to a whole lot of other law students here at this university and a whole lot of law students to come. You know, this building, he's quite proud of this building. And Chris, for those of you who didn't know it, Chris made a Herculean effort to get a new building for the law school. For years and years and years, he worked to get a new building for the law school. Finally, it got here, and he was very proud of it. It was during our own 1L year that I first encountered Chris. We were both members of the class of 1986, and I'm confident in speaking for the rest of our class when I say we were a very close bunch. The tie between law school classmates, as many of you all know, lasts a lifetime, especially amongst those who remain in Kentucky after school. Chris, in many ways, was our lodestar. As Valerie said, in the class rankings, he was number 1. Just before we got here, I talked to Laura Day Delcato, who then was Laura Day Dickinson, and she held that honor for the first semester, and then Chris just took it. And that was the end of it. Put Laura Day, as smart as she is, in the rearview mirror. It was a class of pretty smart cookies, I can tell you that. Now, I can also tell you I was not a scholastic threat to any of them. but we had some smart folks in that class. Chris, though, he wasn't just a superstar student. He was a great person. Everybody loved him. He wasn't this buttoned-up, serious guy, which you would expect, I think, of somebody who would finish first in their class. He was fun. You know, flashy cars, killer guitars, beer. I first met Chris in what we called the Dirty Lounge. Has anybody heard of the Dirty Lounge? We got some hands raised for that. I doubt y'all have a Dirty Lounge anymore. But I'll tell you that was an institution. You could eat, drink, and smoke in there. You could smoke in there. And Chris, he held court in the Dirty Lounge for 3 solid years, surrounded by innumerable cups of coffee and wrapped in a cloud of smoke. Remember, this was the early 1980s, and things really were different then. Needless to say, we became fast friends for life. After we graduated, Chris went to Chicago to work for one of the largest law firms in the nation, Sidley and Austin. It probably was the most prestigious job that anybody in our class got. And I know he was making lots of money. But I also know he was unfulfilled in that job. A nice paycheck wasn't enough for Chris. Chris had a passion. Again, Valerie alluded to this. He loved public service. He believed in giving back. So Chris soon returned home, maybe a decade later. He returned home where he set out to and consequently succeeded at shaping the future of our state. He became the guy who molded legal minds and counseled community leaders. Yes, he was an icon at this law school, but he didn't stop there. In addition to his career here, he spent a good deal of his free time being of service to his community and to those less fortunate than himself, almost all of which he did on a volunteer basis. Candy mentioned some of those things, Valerie, but not all of them. Not all of them. And perhaps the outstanding example of this is his years of service as a board chair and member of the board of the Kentucky Equal Justice Center, whose mission is to advocate for the most vulnerable members of our society. Their founder and director, Rich Seckel, is here today, and he said Chris was highly respected by anybody that he came in contact with for his wisdom, and was instrumental in the center's merger with the Maxwell Street Legal Clinic, among many other things. He really cared about those of us who were less fortunate. As all of his friends know, Chris was highly interested and conversant in public affairs. He ran for the legislature himself in 2006 for a Republican-held seat. Chris, in case you all didn't know, was a staunch Democrat. There's still a handful of those around here in Kentucky. It was basically a suicide mission, and he lost the race. I was one of his advisors, and that may explain why he lost his race. But I can tell you he acquitted himself beautifully. That loss failed to dim his interest in public affairs. Indeed, he seemed to be in even higher demand in the public arena afterwards. His qualities of leadership, his analytical ability, combined with his friendly, affable demeanor, led to his selection to lead the transition team when Jim Gray was elected mayor of Lexington in 2010. He was so highly regarded in that role that 8 years later, Lexington's current mayor, Linda Gordon, also asked him to lead the transition for her incoming administration. I can tell you that doesn't happen very often. And when renovation of the old courthouse finally got moving, Chris was asked to serve on the historic courthouse board of directors and was immediately elected chair. He was the first chair of the board after the $32 million renovation was completed and the building opened for business. And it was a monumental task. Chris made quick, informed decisions as his unsurpassed knowledge of commercial law helped the board navigate annual budgets, tenant relations, public relations, and overall operations. Chris's passion for Lexington and Kentucky was evident in all that he did. And perhaps his most impactful contribution to Kentucky was the role he played in the establishment of the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky, the organization for which I am now fortunate to lead. Chris was a central part of our legal team when we filed a lawsuit to get the money to create that foundation. He helped us get past some nearly insurmountable constitutional issues. We had race judicata issues, estoppel issues. Chris understood that even though you have almost insurmountable issues, even though the law may be against you, sometimes that doesn't lead to the correct result. He intuitively understood the concepts of equity and justice, and he could come up with creative, and I can tell you persuasive, arguments when fairness was on his side and the law wasn't. And he did that in this case. I don't have time to go into all the details because it was incredibly complicated, but suffice it to say, without Chris Frost, the foundation probably would not exist today. That legacy will be a force for improving the lives of Kentuckians for generations to come. And as Jane Childs, the leader of several Catholic initiatives here in Kentucky, said, Chris was such a talented guy and played such a key role in the Anthem lawsuit. That was one of the most energized and satisfying professional experiences I ever had, and interacting with Chris and the team was the best. I'm afraid I've exceeded my time that Miss Candy allotted me, so I'm going to have to stop here, but I know how inadequate my words have been. They can't help but be inadequate. This only scratches the surface of the accolades owed to Chris. But I can tell you this, I will miss our regular lunches, our regular dinners, the wonderful parties at Candy's. He sure did adore you, Miss Candy. And Alex and Nikki, he was so proud of you guys. So proud. And you all are also a major part of his legacy. And I'll conclude by saying, Chris, you didn't stay with us long enough, but you sure did make your mark in our communities and in our hearts.
ashes in the wind, still standing here together. One more storm to weather, we'll get through, yeah. So we're gathered here, holding on to each other, to let go of another one. And as we say goodbye to one of our own, we may be lonely, but we're not alone. Though the leaves will fall and the tears will flow, may it always comfort us to know the family tree will always grow. Father down to son, mother to daughter, thicker than water, we are made of this. From the earth we rise, to the earth returning, we'll keep a candle burning for one we'll miss. Now as we say goodbye to one of our own, we may be lonely, but we're not alone. Though the leaves will fall and the tears will flow, may it always comfort us to know the family tree will always grow, stronger than the wind can blow. Family tree will always grow.
Our next speaker, Grace Greenwell, was a student at the University of Kentucky College of Law between 2015 and 2018. She attended both of Chris's contracts and bankruptcy courses. She was a member of the moot court team that Chris coached. In fact, that team finished in the top 8 nationally. Chris nominated Grace for the Distinguished Law Student for the Sixth Circuit Award, which she received in 2018. Grace is currently corporate counsel at Wyland Group. Chris was extremely proud of Grace's achievements, and they remained friends even after she graduated. Grace.
On the second Thursday in January, I lost, as so many of you lost, my teacher and my mentor. Professor Frost need not be enlarged in death beyond what he was in life to be remembered as a giant of this college, of the Kentucky bar, and of the profession of law. When I arrived here in 2015, students were divided into 2 sections, identified officially with names like Section 1 and 2, or A and B. I can't remember, because as we tried to identify members of our section through orientation activities, we would simply ask, do you have frost for contracts? If you answered yes without demonstrating a sufficient level of fear, especially when speaking to a second or third year student, you were immediately told at least one of three things. He would lock you out of class if you were late. He would ask you to leave if you were unprepared. He was guaranteed, at least once per semester, to lose his temper so badly that he would have to leave the classroom and calm down before returning. He did lock the door when class began, but that was all for me. It might have been, as one third-year student put it, I had not fully experienced the real Professor Frost, because he had a girlfriend now. He'd gone soft. She would become his wife, and with her openness and intoxicating authenticity, she would become my invitation to a closer relationship with Professor Frost outside of the classroom. On the first day of class, my 1L year, I was cold called. I essentially blacked out while I answered the question until I heard Professor Frost say, "Well done, Miss Greenwell," and quickly move on. Generally, when you're called on, you're safe for the next few classes while other people get hit. But the next class, he wanted to reference back to the case that I had spoken to 2 days earlier. So he called on me again. He thought he was throwing me a bone, but the blank and sheer panic that came over my face was so apparent that it made him laugh and say, "You're drinking out of a fire hose right now, Miss Greenwell, aren't you?" He answered the question himself. Though he was kind to me in that moment, I felt so disappointed in myself that I vowed to never be caught off guard in his class ever again. I would work the hardest that I had ever worked in school. And when I couldn't find motivation to do it for myself, I found it for Professor Frost. That way of motivating students, that was magic. I've spent the past month asking my classmates how we could have feared and loved him both so intensely. All agreed that although he was hard, there was no question that fundamentally Professor Frost wanted you to succeed. He believed we all had the potential to be good lawyers. But instead of telling us with those words, he would say things like, "It ain't rocket science. Sit yourself in the chair long enough and read it again until you figure it out." During office hours, if it was clear to him that you had brought him a question without first putting in significant work to answer it yourself, he might tell you to not waste his time. But if you were working hard and came to him for help, Professor Frost showed you patience and gave you unlimited time. I wasn't originally planning to tell you this story, but I see my bankruptcy moot court partner, Spencer Gray, out here, and I do want to share that Professor Frost and Miss Candy joined us as we made our way to New York for that moot court competition, and we got stuck in Chicago. And Professor Frost looked at us, our flights were canceled, and Professor Frost looked at us and offered us two options. One, he'd rent us a car and, quote, he'd get us there. Or two, we could get a hotel in Chicago and he'd show us all of his spots from when he had practiced there. My partners and I looked at each other and immediately said, "We want to stay in Chicago. We want to see everything you did. We honestly just wanted to hang out with you. We don't really care about the competition." Candy had to pull strings to get us admission at tickets to go to Barrister's Ball when we were able to make it back by Saturday. I feel like the group of us got to spend that last third-year experience together. Professor Frost was intentional about molding our character as much as our minds. He did that through example. In the face of a profession that can mistake appearance for substance, he wore jeans and cowboy boots, and yet maintained the highest standards and formalities in his classroom. Professor Frost showed me that being underestimated couldn't stop me from doing great things unless I let it. As a mentor, he never minimized my feelings, but he could take the sting out of a problem or an injustice and break it down to what really mattered. After one of my first motion hours as a practicing attorney, I called Professor Frost enraged that the judge had referred to me, the only woman in the courtroom, as a lady lawyer. Professor Frost took a deep breath and laughed and said, "Well, was your motion granted?" It had been, and it was a really important way to start that conversation. I believe Professor Frost's last season of life was a thriving one. He was living exactly as he wanted to be living. One time, I pitched to him to run for office again. I begged him to. And he said, "Miss Greenwell, I'm a tenured professor at law school. I've hit the jackpot. Why would I ruin it with a thing like that?" Another time, I found him in his office, giddy. He had just had lunch with Chief Justice John Roberts. Smiling from ear to ear, he said, "This is as big as it gets in my world." This was cool. He knew the impact he was having on his students and thus the legal profession. As Miss Candy quickly became a staple at law school functions, she came to know it too. After reading an article wherein I was quoted about receiving that award Professor Frost nominated me for, Miss Candy looked at him and correctly observed, "Chris, you changed that girl's life." He turned to her and said, "Yeah, that's what I do, babe. I change lives." He was living life fully content and on his terms. Auden wrote a poem eulogizing the poet W.B. Yeats, 3 lines of which I'd like to share with you now. "The death of the poet was kept from his poems. He became his admirers, and now he is scattered in 100 cities." I can feel Professor Frost rolling his eyes at being compared to a poet, but these lines are true of our beloved teacher. I hope it comforts you as it comforts me to know that his legacy knows not of his death, that he is scattered among 100 cities, and that he has become his admirers.
Okay, this is getting harder. I'm very honored to introduce Tab McKinstry. She was a mentor to Chris and someone he lovingly referred to as his bankruptcy mom. She is currently the managing member of Fowler Bell PLLC. She has been a member of the American College of Bankruptcy since 1994 and currently serves as chair of her firm's commercial law and bankruptcy and creditors' rights group. Her mentorship played a large role in my brother's success in becoming a prominent member himself of the bankruptcy community. Taft.
Thank you, Valerie. I never knew that I was a bankruptcy mom, but I guess I am now. I learn all kinds of things in life. First of all, smile. I want everybody in the room to smile, because for some reason, every time in life when I heard Chris's name, saw an email, saw an article, somehow his name flashed across my mind, I couldn't help but smile. He was such a wonderful man, and he was always smiling. I never heard a story of him ever getting mad at a student. I can't imagine. So let's all, seriously, I can't imagine. So let's all smile. He was a low-key, gentle, kind, loving, extremely smart, but never told you that man that we will miss. He graduated in 1986 with Laura Day, Del Cato, and we heard their rivalry today, didn't we? When they graduated in 1986, I had long left this law school. Many years before. Yes, I know the dungeon downstairs. I'm very, very familiar with it. I'm so glad it's gone. When I graduated law school, there were 5 women in the 3 classes. And bankruptcy was taught by Judge Jolie. And I learned from Professor Lawson more criminal law procedure than I'd ever used in my entire life, but thank you. I can't remember when I met Chris. It was like he was always a best friend. Such a good man. So I need to tell a story. The American College of Bankruptcy has been mentioned, and those of us that are privileged to be fellows in the Sixth Circuit decided that we would have a little meeting every fall, which Candy has gone to with us. And we started in the late 90s, and one year we went to Michigan to an outdoor football game in the cold and snow, and another year we went to Columbus to an outdoor music festival, and we've been to Tennessee, and we've been to Lexington, and been to Keeneland. And one year it was Kentucky's turn again for the Sixth Circuit Fellows and their significant others or spouses to get together, and we ended up in Louisville, Churchill Downs. But of course, we had to have 3 hours of CLE on Saturday morning, so from 9 to 12 we had speakers. So this time in Louisville we had Professor Prost, and some other people speak, and I remember standing in the back of the room, and Chris, for some reason, was up talking like he was just teaching a class, some esoteric subject that I can't remember, but at least he brought it down so that some of us could understand it. And I was standing at the back of the room, and one of the fellows from Ohio, who is kind of a leader in the international and national bankruptcy field as well as the college, came up to me and whispered and said, "Why is this professor not in the college?" And I said, "Well, I think you got a point. We'll take care of that." So the next year, in spring, I conspired, or his secretary, April, conspired with me to find his resume and type up his nomination. And it was the thickest nomination I've ever seen. And it goes on for pages of writing and speeches and involvement and teaching, and I mean, it's very impressive. And so naturally, as it went up the chain, with the signatures of Jerry Truitt and the signature of Laura Day and the letters of Judge Schaff and the letters of Judge Wise and the letters of Judge Lee, there was no doubt that Chris would be invited to be a fellow. And he was. In the fall of 2014, he received a letter inviting him to be a fellow in the college. The fun thing is, though, as Candy told me, he got that letter right before their first date, and all he could do was talk about how happy he was, how proud he was. And he deserved to be. He was a wonderful, wonderful person. Part of that nomination is how much one is involved in the bankruptcy field, and obviously there's no doubt that he was very much involved in the bankruptcy field, but there's a part B to that nomination, and that is one must be involved in the community. And Chris, as we've all heard today, was very involved in the community. He practically, with his students, wrote for Judge Wise, working closely with Judge Wise, a finance handbook for elderly people. He, as we've heard, has served for 2 different terms as chair of the transition committee for the mayor. So there was no doubt that his community, the school, the college, have all benefited from him. he nominated Grace to be a distinguished law student from the Sixth Circuit in the field of law, and against much competition from the Sixth Circuit, Grace was chosen, and he was so proud of that. I don't know when the man slept. I really don't. If you look at this resume and if you add it up, this was 2014. Think of what it would look like today. It's got to be that thick. I really don't know when the man slept. And when did he have time to sit around at a table and drink a beer and chit-chat? But he did. And I remember being at a reception, cocktail party, dinner party, who knows. And I looked over in the corner, and there was Chris talking to my husband, and they were just going at it. Of course, Chris loved Corvettes, and my husband loved Jaguars, and so they were talking about how fast each of them would go, I'm sure. I want to thank Chris Bradley for the beautiful article that he wrote for Chris in the newspaper. It was heartwarming and heart-rending and lovely. And I understand that Ellen Kennedy has undertaken the project of substitute teaching for Chris in his bankruptcy class. And that in itself is a major challenge. Thank you, Ellen. As I say, just thinking of Chris brings a big smile to my face. I want to thank Chris for all the smiles that he's brought to us. We are smiling for you now, and Chris, we know you're smiling with us. Thank you all.
I guess if we talk about Taft being his bankruptcy mom, our next speaker, Robert Lawson, would have been his law dad, for sure. Bob Lawson was the dean of the law school from 1971 to 73, and then again from 1982 to 88, during which time Chris was a law student. Bob, as many of you know, has received multiple awards for his work towards law reform in Kentucky. But to us, Bob became a great mentor and friend, true friend to Chris over the years. In many ways, Bob reminded Chris of his own father. They shared the strong bond of mutual love for the law school and students. Even after Bob retired, Chris knew he could always count on Bob and enjoyed their frequent lunches in the campus dining hall among the students. Bob?
I think what I gotta do first is to confess to you that never have I faced a tougher task than this one. Chris Frost was the best friend I ever had, and I'm still struggling to try to deal with the loss of that friendship. It's going to take me a while to do that, so I hope you all keep that in mind as I try to say some things about him that I want to say. Mostly I want to talk about what Chris meant to the law school and what the law school meant to him. But before I do that, I want to say a few things about some of his family members. Chris and I spent a lot of time together over a period of 20-some years. We talked about everything, but he talked more about his family than about anything else. And so I want to say just a few things, all based on what he told me about them, about 4 or 5 of them who are here today. Now there's some others who are here, but these are the ones that he talked to me the most about. Most of you know Chris's wife Candy and know what a special relationship that the two of them had. I've always thought that Candy was a perfect fit for Chris. He talked about her all the time, and it was always as good as anything could ever be. What Candy did toward the end is unbelievable. She cared for him more than anybody could have ever done. And toward the end of it, she rarely left his side. I greatly appreciate what she did for him, and I want her to know that. I'm just glad she's here today to hear all of this. I'm also glad that Chris's sister and his mother are here. He talked a lot about his sister, and it was very clear to me that there was a special relationship that existed between sister and brother. He was very proud of what she had done, both personally and professionally, and he, to say the least, he loved his sister a lot. He talked to me as much about his mother as he did about his sister. And it was very clear that there was a very special mother-son relationship that existed between the two of them. I had a chance to talk with her one time when she came to Lexington and talk with her a little bit about Chris. And I could tell from that she had the same kind of close, warm feelings toward Chris that he had toward her. It was an unbelievable mother-son relationship. And then there are Chris's kids. He started telling me about his son Alex when Alex was just a child. Now, I never did get to see Alex face to face until he was approaching adulthood. Chris took me to an event one day at an entertainment facility here in town, and I had my first face-to-face encounter with Alex. It was an event that involved a small band that was made up of young musicians, of which Alex was one of them. Now, I enjoyed the music, but what I enjoyed more than anything was to see the kind of interaction that Chris and Alex had. And I saw it on many, many occasions after that. And what I saw was a relationship between father and son that was off the charts. It could not have been any better than it was. Chris talked an awful lot about Nikki also. And in that conversation, he made it very clear that he had the same kind of affection and love that most fathers have for their daughters. He was particularly proud of what Nikki had done in college, which I think was at Center College here in Kentucky. But then his pride went off the charts when she graduated from the medical school here at UK and received her doctor's degree. I did not know her and had no contact much with her until she became a friend with one of my granddaughters, a classmate of hers in medical school. Then I got to know her well. And what I saw there was a relationship between Nikki and her dad that paralleled the close relationship that he had with Alex. To say the least, he loved his kids as much as any father has ever done. Now, I'm just glad that they're all here today to hear us talk about Chris and what a special person he was. Now, in trying to think about what I might say about what Chris meant to the law school and what the law school meant to Chris. I became overwhelmingly impressed with statements that were made about him by a lot of people who knew him as well as I did. These were statements that were exactly identical to the statements that I would have made about him on my own. And so I decided that I wanted to use them to describe for you what Chris meant to the college and what he meant to the law school. The statement that was made about him that I loved the most was made by Dean Mary Davis. Dean Davis wrote a nice piece about Chris and submitted it to the faculty and the staff in reporting that he had just died. The statement that she made that I loved was at the end of her piece. Quote, "He was a fabulous, dedicated professor. He's a graduate of this school. He loved the place and our students. To say that he will be missed is a colossal understatement. A colossal understatement for sure. I'll miss him forever." Two of Chris's colleagues on the faculty, Professor Jennifer Bird Poland and Professor Christopher Bradley, they're probably here, wrote a beautiful piece about Chris that got published in the local newspaper. They described some of his accomplishments that he, while a faculty member at the university. But mostly, in my mind, they made statements that paint a clear and true picture of the great friend that he was. And so I want to share with you 4 of those statements that caught my eye. 1, he was part of the soul of the law school, was one of its legends. 2, he had a loyal following of students and many graduates who credit him for their success. 3, in conversations, he was kind but honest, brilliant but unpretentious, and met you where you were. 4, last but not least, Chris cared deeply about the city of Lexington and the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and his influence will be felt for decades to come. Decades for sure, probably longer. 2 days after Chris died, I walked out of my office at the law school and went down the hallway toward his office, something that I did on a regular basis when he was healthy and coming to school. This time, I did it trying to ease my grief a little. When I got to his office, I discovered that on his door there were handwritten notes that covered the door from the top to the bottom. I don't know exactly how many, but there were probably 100. These were statements that were left there by some of his former students, all leaving absolutely no doubt about what his loss meant to them. I spent a long time reading every single one of the statements. And then, before I left his office, I copied some of them to keep for myself. I want to share with you 4 of those statements that are typical of all of them. 1, I'm so lucky to have been taught by such an outstanding professor and an even more remarkable person. 2, I will always remember him and be thankful for the impact he had on me. Thank you for having a huge influence on everybody you taught and for changing lives every day. 3, I will always remember him and be thankful for the impact he had on me. Professor Frost is one of the reasons I fell in love with the law school. And 4, last, not least, your departure to the great unknown has left a huge hole in my heart. I'm not sure that the hole will ever mend. These 4 statements, typical of the scores and scores of statements that were on the door, and they leave absolutely no room about how much his students loved their professor and respected our friend. My final statement concerning what the law school meant to Chris and what he meant to the school is a statement that was made by Chris himself. 2 days before Chris died, he called me on my phone when I was home. Something that occurred regularly over the last few months of his life when he was too sick to come to school. We talked for a long time on this occasion about a lot of different things, and never once did he express any concerns whatsoever about what was ahead. As usual, he was totally upbeat about everything and downbeat about absolutely nothing. At the end of this final conversation that I had with him, the last words that I ever heard from him, he made a short, simple statement that I will never forget. Quote, "I can't wait to get back into my classroom." 48 hours before he passed away, he said, "I can't wait to get back into my classroom." In this very short statement, reflecting the positive attitude on life that he always had and never lost, Chris left no room for any doubt about how much he loved the college and especially how much he loved his students. To borrow once again from Dean Davis, where she so eloquently said, to say that he will be missed is a colossal understatement. No one I know will ever forget what he's done for others. And for sure, I can tell you that I'm going to miss him for the rest of my life.
Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. Well, I walked out this morning and I wrote down this song. I just can't remember who to send it to. Oh, I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend, but I always thought I'd see you again. Oh, won't you look down upon me, Jesus? You got to help me make a stand. You just got to see me through another day. My body's aching and my time is at hand, and I won't make it any other way. Oh, I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend, but I always thought I'd see you. I've been walking my mind to an easy time with my back turned towards the sun. God knows when the cold wind blows, it'll turn your head around. There's hours of time on the telephone line to talk about things to come. Sweet dreams and flying machines in pieces on the ground. Oh, I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend, but I always thought I'd see you, baby, one more time again. Thought I'd see you one more time again. Oh, and there's just a few things coming my way this time around now. I thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you, fire and rain. Oh, I thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you, fire and rain. I thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you, fire and rain. Oh, I thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you. I thought I'd see you, thought I'd see you, fire and rain.
Everybody doing okay? I'm hanging in there for sure. But I wanted to thank Dean Davis and the staff of the law school, our great tech folks here, Zach, for all the help you had in helping us put this together. It's an amazing experience. And to our speakers, I mean, you represented Christopher so well, and we could not be prouder and more thankful of each of you for the words that you shared with us today. After we conclude here, in just a minute, we have reception, food, and some wine and beer. We may all need that. So please join us for the next couple hours in a reception. And the last thanks I want to give is to my boys, Scott and Eric, who are professional musicians, as you can tell, but probably the hardest gig they've ever had to play in their entire lives. Thank you both so much. We're very proud of you, and Christopher would have really loved the rock out at the end, by the way. So that was really Chris's time. So thank you very much. So that concludes the service, and please join us as hosted by the law school. fabulous reception we have waiting for us in the hallway. Thank you.